Hello again, friends, and welcome to another segment of Doc G's Wine and Spirits Review. As you can see by my glass here tonight, we're going to start out with a little bit of red. But what's unique about the red that's in this glass, I actually participated in the making of this wine. So you might be wondering, well, Doc G, how is it that you were able to do that? Well, the way I was able to do that is that I am involved with a place that is not a winery, but it is a place where you can go and make wine, and the name of that place is called Stone and Key Cellars. So in tonight's segment, I'd like to feature Stone and Key Cellars and what they do in their operation and at their location. As you can see here, all of your labels are from Stone and Key Cellars, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them. But before I do, let me sample this one that I made. Made this one last year. It's a nice Sangiovese, from Washington State. And I'll talk more about that later. So let me start out by introducing again Stone and Key Cellars. They are a wine making operation, for lack of a better term, in Montgomeryville, Pennsylvania. They don't have a vineyard. They don't grow grapes. What they do is they source grapes from a number of locations around the country. So what you can do at Stone and Key, really since it's not a winery, is that you get involved in the process by deciding what grape it is that you want to use, and then you go all the way through the process. Once you pick out your grape, they bring the grape in, and I'll talk about that a little bit. They bring in your grape, then you go through the crush. Remember, we talked about this a little bit before. You go through the press. You can actually then, once it's pressed, it goes through its fermentation, and a little bit later, they'll invite you back at the appropriate time, whether it's a white or a red wine, for a barrel tasting. And then they'll let it sit the appropriate time again, based on whether it's a red or wine. And then you can come back and participate in the bottling process. And then finally, you actually get to choose your own label, which I'm going to show you in a minute for the one of the three, actually, that I've been able to get involved with at Stone and Key. So, in addition to Stone and Key being a wine, so they call themselves a wine cellar. They also make ciders, which are very popular right now, apple ciders from local orchards in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And they make some fruit wines sourced locally, and they also make a vermouth, which I had talked about in our segment on martinis last week. And this is a collaboration with Philadelphia Distilling, who makes Blue Coat gin. So you can only get this at Stone and Key. So let's talk about then, I said they source their own grapes. So where do they actually get the grapes that you see here in these bottles on the table? Well, they source from Lake County, California. They source from Washington State. I know for a fact that they source from the Yakima Valley in Washington State, because the Sangiovese in this glass, this is really good, is from Yakima Valley in Washington State. And they also source, and those are all for a fall harvest. And then they also have connections in Chile. And then they get those grapes, because remember, the seasons are reversed. In Chile, your grapes are harvested in May. So the kind of grapes that they get, it's really things like Syrah, Zinfandel, Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmenere, Merlot, Sangiovese, like the one in this glass. Some of the whites that they get are Chardonnay, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris. I'm going to sample a Chardonnay and a Pinot Gris here for you tonight that was made by their winemakers at Stone and Key. They also do Riesling, and they do Sauvignon Blanc. Some of the grapes that they get from Chile include some of the same, but in addition, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Pinot Noir, which they source from Chile as well. Chile is a region that I'll talk about in the future, because it is an amazing wine growing region that doesn't get the credit that it deserves. So with that said, my recommendation to you, this isn't really a very involved segment. It's just kind of really to introduce you to Stone and Key. I'm telling you, you can have a really good time at this place. I've been there a number of times, and I've purchased a bit of their wine. I've also participated in a number of winemakings, which I'll get to in a minute. But in terms of what I would recommend that you do if you're really interested in this place once you hear about it, and I'll post afterwards too. They're on Facebook. You can find them. For my Pennsylvania friends, they're only an hour away from where I am. So from wherever you are, you can gauge that. For my friends out of state, I'm sorry to tell you, you'll just have to enjoy this with me. And maybe if you finally get to meet me, I can share some Stone and Key wine with you. But I would round up a group of friends, see if they want to go in on a quarter barrel, see if they want to go in on a half barrel, see if they want to go in on a full barrel. All of those things come at a cost. But what will happen then is that process that I described earlier. You'll pick out your own grapes. You'll go through the process as much as you want to be involved or as little as you want to be involved. Because one thing that Stone and Key does is for each barrel that they make, they take a little bit off the top and they make their own wine then and label it and sell it as well. So they want to make sure that your wine is good because they're also selling it out of their store. So that would be my recommendation if you're really interested in doing something unique and different around wine. So, and if you don't really want to get that involved, you say, well, you know what, Doc, gee, that's a little bit too much money. I don't really feel like dumping, because you're going to need a couple $100 to get involved in at least a quarter barrel, and that's with a couple friends. And let me just digress here a little bit. When you actually, if you would do a quarter barrel, which I've done with 4 other friends, quarter barrel is going to work out to you spending about 12 to 13, maybe 14, depending on the grape, a bottle. And you'll get a case and a half from that quarter barrel if you go in with 3 other people, if it's divided 4 ways. I think that's a fantastic deal. And you'll get to keep all that good wine. You can give it away as gifts, let it age. You can, and of course, just drink it. So, but if you don't like any of that, go to the tasting room. They have one in Montgomeryville, just off of Route 202, where 202 meets 309 over in Montgomeryville. If you're not interested in that, I think they're opening a store soon in Ambler. We can check the Facebook page on that. But you can go visit the tasting room. It's open 7 days a week. You can go taste any of the wines that they happen to have if you just want to have a glass or do a flight. And then you can decide from there whether or not that's something that you might want to get into. The only reason my real reason behind bringing this up is that there's more to winemaking than just going to a winery or going to the liquor store. If you really want to get into this pretty deep, you can actually get involved in the process, and I'll tell you what, it's a lot of fun. So let me tell you about my experience with Stone and Key, what I've done so far in the last year or so. It took me about a year till I got used to them, and then I decided that, you know what, I think I want to participate in the winemaking process. Because prior to them, I was involved with another place similar to them that just, I don't want to spoil anybody's reputation, so I'm not going to say who they were, but I'm no longer going back there. And we found this place, and they are 3 steps above the place that we used to go before. So the first thing I want to talk about, well, let me talk about the 3 wines that I've been involved in. One is this Sangiovese. And I can tell you, I haven't featured Sangiovese yet. But look at the color of that here in the nice light at the end of the day. Wonderful cherry nose. You can almost see through it. These are great with spaghetti and sauce. Bright acidity. And I don't really want to feature Sangiovese, but I'm telling you, if I slapped a label on here from some Italian winery, you'd go, oh my God, that's pretty damn good. Well, guess what? This is pretty damn good too. So, and I'll give credit to the winemakers there. I mean, we shoveled the grapes into the bin, we watched the press, but they get involved in the fermentation and they oversee your wine. They put it in the barrel and let it sleep for you. But you really are intimately involved with the process. It's really a lot of fun. Second wine I was involved with there was a rosé of Mourvedre. And one of the things that I want to tell you here is a little side story. We went in on with my 3 other friends who go there, and we bought a quarter barrel of Mourvedre rosé from the Yakima Valley in Washington. Went through the whole process. That's a shorter process than the reds because it doesn't barrel age. And we went and we picked our wine up back in sometime in early May. Well, the first couple bottles we opened were fantastic. I think I even featured one in my rosé feature. Unfortunately, those wines started to spoil. And this is one of the things that happens in the winemaking process. It can happen to anybody, to the best of them. So what happened was the bottles wound up going through a malolactic fermentation in the bottle. And I talked about that before when we talked about Chardonnay. Malolactic fermentation is supposed to go forward, or is supposed to take place in the barrel. So that was a problem. It created bacteria in the wine, and basically it skunked it. It's kind of a word we use. It got a sulfur smell. It started to push corks out of the bottle. It fizzed like champagne, and that's because it was going through a secondary fermentation. Long story short on that, I called back to Stone and Key. And to their credit, and I want to say this wholeheartedly, because I'm still doing this segment, this spoiled wine did not bother me. They made good on every bottle that I had that was bad. They actually went back and checked their stock, and they agreed with me. And they said, you know what? Something happened in the winemaking process. We're not really sure, but we'll make good for your wine. And what they did was they provided me with this Chardonnay that you see here. They let me come back to the store, and they let me take an equivalent amount of the wine that I had that was spoiled. So to them, I want to say kudos and thank you. And it's always good to support local businesses, and it's always good that those businesses in turn support you when you run into a problem like that. So the third wine, back to the story, the third wine that I'm involved in with them is wine that's sitting in a quarter barrel right now. That's being, we call it a commissioned wine. It's a Rhone red, Rhone Valley from France, and they generally consist of Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. So they wound up being able to get some Grenache, and we're going to go back for a blending session probably in a couple weeks. Then we're going to put it back in the barrel and let it sit, and we'll probably pick up our wine sometime in September or early October, and each of my friends and I will get 18 bottles or a case and a half of a good, we call it a GSM, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, a nice Côte d'Rhône Valley red wine. So what I'd like to do, in addition to sampling this Sangiovese, because I'm going to come back to that as soon as I have another sip, I want to sample for you one of the wines that they actually let me take. The first one here, this is a Chardonnay from them. Now this Chardonnay is from the Columbia Valley in Washington State. They call it their reserve. It's 12.9 ABV. It's partially malolactic fermented, which means they only take a certain portion of it and do that. But it is a little bit of a bigger wine. I haven't really had the chance to sample it other than in the store. They actually let me sample the ones and take the ones that I liked. So I like this one. You can smell the yeast on here. I should have taken a case of this. It's really very good. It's got a little bit of almond on it, a little bit of lemon. It's got a little bit of minerality on it. That's good wine. So let's set that one aside. Set the glass aside here so we don't break those nice Doc G's wine and spirits glasses that my son gave me. And let's go to the other one that I was able to, that I kind of liked. And that's in this smaller glass. And this is a Pinot Gris. And this Pinot Gris was also sourced, block my view here, this Pinot Gris was sourced in the Columbia Valley as well. Now this is Pinot Grigio. Pinot Gris, it's called a lot, you know, in the French words. Gray Pinot, if you want to get technical. This isn't Cavit. This is really good. And it's got a little bit of green apple, a little bit of peach, little tart lemon. I always tell people they underestimate Pinot Grigio. You get good Pinot Grigio, it may be one of the best wines you can get. It is fantastic, but you've got to get the right one. This one is actually very good. So let's set that one aside. Finally, the one that we made, and if you notice, it doesn't have the Stone and Key label on it. It has the label that my friends and I designed. and we call ourselves the Quartetto Enofilo in Italian. And the wine underneath there, it says Vini che non fanno schifo. Well, that's wines that do not, and I'm not going to use the word, they don't stink. It's a different word, but my friends have a great sense of humor. So back to that wine. This is the Sangiovese. I have 18 of these. I burned through about 9 of them already. And I got them last fall. I've given away a few for gifts. I've gotten great compliments. And this is from the Yakima Valley in Washington State. And it is 14.9, it's almost 15%. This is a big little wine. So it tastes a little bit of oak on it now that it's opening up. What a really good wine. They do make other wines as well. I took one of these. This is one that it's a 2014. These guys have been around a while. And this one is ageable. This is their version of what they call a Bordeaux wine. And I promised to do a segment on Bordeaux. But this wine has Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Petit Verdot. And it is 14% alcohol. I'm sure it's going to be great. I'll be honest with you. I have not tried it yet, but I'm letting it age a little bit. With age, they get a little bit better sometimes. So that is another one that you can get at Stone and Key. And they must have at least 20 more that are on the shelf at any given time. And I would be remiss if I didn't go back to this. I actually want to do a little sample here. You know, when we talk about martinis, you can actually, which they do in Europe, you can sip vermouth on its own. Now this vermouth is made, it's a Chardonnay-based vermouth. And I don't know their proprietary use of herbs and other spices that they put into this, but you can sip this over ice. It's still a little bit cold. I keep it cold once it's open. That's pleasant just alone, let alone in a martini. Wow, what a good way to end. Fantastic. So these all are things that you can get at Stone and Key and more. And I would also say to you, it's worth it for the experience if you want to get involved in the process, showing the grapes out of there and watching them press and doing your bottling, designing your own label. It's really a lot of fun. So if you really get deep into the wine culture, it's something that I think would be worth your time if you're really that interested. So my advice, very simple. Get in your car if you live around here, go over to Montgomeryville, go visit, take your friends, take your spouse, take your partner, make it a day out. They have food trucks over there. Sometimes they have music. I know it's a little bit of a ride for some people that are local here, but it'd be a nice day out, a nice date. You can go out with your friends and have a really good time at Stone and Key Cellars. So, let me finish with a little toast for you. With that Chardonnay, I'm telling you, you gotta go. So until our next time, my friends, santé, cheers, and we'll see you next time.